Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome on behalf of Transform, the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies, to this online event hosted by the Transform MEP interest group on realizing the potential of transformative therapies, a European pharmaceutical strategy that enables safe and timely patient access to cell and gene therapies. My name is Jackie Davis. I have the privilege of moderating our discussion this afternoon as we consider the challenges and the opportunities of cell and gene therapies and discuss what needs to be done to realize their full potential. Bit of housekeeping before we get underway. If you want to ask a question, please go in the Slido tab to the chat function inside the Slido tab on the right-hand side of your screen and write your question. It would be very helpful, please, if you could mention your affiliation so I know who you are. And also, please be as brief as possible so that I can see at a glance what your question is and who it's for. If you want to tweet out, send the message out about transformative therapies from this event, and we do encourage you to do so, please use the hashtag MEPs for ATMPs and the tag @transform_CGT. On the left of your screen, you will see a reception button. Click there if you want to find the program, the timings of this event, and the speaker bios. And there will be opportunities to network at the end of this event as well. I'll tell you about that later. We're now going to get underway, and we're starting. Alexandra Moretti MEP, who's the co-chair of the Transform MEP interest group and shadow rapporteur on the EU's pharmaceutical strategy, couldn't be with us, but she did want to speak to you. So she sent us this video message. Let's hear what she has to say.
Dear colleagues and friends, it's a great pleasure to address you on such an important issue. I'm particularly glad to share this common battle with so many of you, and I would like to apologize for not being present today in person. However, I wanted to send you a short message to demonstrate once again my commitment on this topic. I would like to thank my colleague Andrei Knoktek for being so important in the development of this interest group and all the people working in the Secretariat. My personal approach to these sensitive and articulated issues is always to rely on the scientific community. For me, being a politician and not a scientist, the main concern is to build up my positions and political orientations based on facts. We know that in the last few years, medical and clinical research have made tremendous advancements in the field of innovative and personalized medicine. We need to make sure that those opportunities are exploited in the interest of patients. I want to be very clear. If we imagine a situation where all innovative and transformative therapies are approved just because they are new or more complex than existing one, this is not what patients need. We need to be very serious and very scrupulous on this. Innovative, transformative gene therapies are just a tool that should be used in the interest of patients. This means that they have to prove their added value with respect to existing ones. They need to prove to be beneficial for patients and to have less side effects. Therefore, we need to be very careful on this. However, once this added value is demonstrated, our duty as public institutions is to make sure that everyone has access to these potentially revolutionary therapies. The main object of the Transform MEP interest group is to raise awareness on the potential that these medical innovations have for patients and consequently help shaping the policy in the interest of patients. One of the main objectives will be to adapt the regulatory frameworks to enable safe access for patients when and if those therapies are proved their benefit compared to those currently available and demonstrated to be beneficial for patients. This is also the same approach I have chosen in my work as shadow rapporteur for the pharmaceutical strategy. We are working with other very competent colleagues to achieve a balanced test with a modern and patient-centered focus. while ensuring that all the potential of innovation and research are exploited at their best. Always need to be very careful in terms of equitable access to affordable and efficient treatments for all. In this legislative term, we have the chance to further develop the capacity of the EU to address public health and to protect our citizens in times where health-related issues became fundamental everywhere in Europe. I'm confident that with the contribution of everyone, we will be able to shape a Europe closer to our citizens, and I look forward to working with you on this. Thanks to you.
Moretti there with her hopes for the Alliance, for this interest group and what it can achieve. And the key question that she asked, once these therapies have proven their value, how do we make sure that everyone has access to what she called potentially revolutionary therapies? What sort of adaptations to the regulatory framework will be needed? We're going to hear some recommendations developed by the Transform Alliance to that end in just a moment. Lots to come back to in our discussion. But we also wanted to get a sense from you of what you think is important at this crucial stage, at this moment of opportunity with the pharmaceutical strategy to make real progress in creating the best possible enabling conditions for these therapies. So I wanted to ask you to provide a word for us, for a word cloud. And the question, and if you use the Slido tab, you'll be able to type in your one word and you have a little bit of time to think about it, because I'm going to tell you what the question is, and then we'll have a look at the results after we've heard the Transform recommendations. So you may want to wait, listen to those recommendations and decide on the basis of that what you think is important, but don't wait too long because we'll close it at some point, or you can put in your answer now. The key question that we are asking is, what do you see as the biggest priority for the Transform agenda on cell and gene therapies? And let me just give you, maybe to inspire you a bit, some possible words you might choose: accessibility, infrastructure, safety, data, cross-border access, issues like that. You pick your word, fill it in if you would, and we'll have a little look a bit later on at the results. But the key thing we're going to do now is we're going to have the launch of the Transform recommendations, challenges and opportunities for transformative therapies. And as we've heard, we heard from Alessandra Moretti, the aim of the Transform Alliance is to foster effective dialogue and provide evidence-based policy recommendations to enable safe and timely access to these therapies while ensuring the sustainability of health systems. We're going to hear just that, recommendations co-created with patient groups, with clinicians, with scientists, experts and industry representatives. We have three speakers who've been involved in that process who will present different aspects of the recommendations to you. First, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Simone Bosselli, EU Public Affairs Director at Eurordis, to kick us off. Simone, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today once again with you. Hopefully we will be able to shed some light and starting again in understanding what the actual opportunity is now that we have in front of us. And that, if you were going to ask me, is the word that I would use today to represent what we are what we are trying to do at the moment. But first, let me start with a little bit of history. In 2017, at an event organized by the STOA panel at the European Parliament, our Chief Executive Officer, Jan Lekam, introduced the key challenges that we still see today that create obstacles to the optimal access to life-changing transformative therapies. And we call them the 4 A's of ATMPs, particularly in assessment, when there is a struggle to interpret the evidence of clinical benefits associated with gene and cell therapy; affordability, the concern about the idea of large one-off payments or deferred payments or payment for outcomes, or the initial quite high price tag that these treatments come with; the availability of these therapies due to the fragmentation of the European market, which leads to great inequalities in access across and within member states; and finally, access, with the complexity of the process to develop and bring to patient these therapies might mean limited expert centers available not only in member states but even across Europe for this highly complex treatment. It is not 2017 any longer. 4 years down the line, we are making progresses. However, not at the same pace of the innovation that we are seeing coming. Since then, we have seen coming to market at least 3 CAR-T therapies and several gene therapies addressing very different rare to very rare diseases and rare cancer, from inherited retinal dystrophy to spinal muscular atrophy to metachromatic leukodystrophy. And the scientific developments continue. The patient community cannot be more hopeful, as these treatments try to tackle the underlying causes of the rare diseases, which, by the way, for 72% in these cases are of the genetic origins, but are concerned about the potential challenges to optimal access across Europe. As we have an agreement on the regulation on health technology assessment coordination across Europe, unless the COREPER today decided otherwise, which includes advanced therapeutical medicinal products in the scope from the beginning, the recommendation of the Transform Alliance, which are also building upon some of the work that, as EURORDIS, we are conducting since 2017, namely the Rare Impact Consortium, are very timely. Today, I would focus on a few of them in my 2 minutes left, particularly enabling the use of real-world data through the creation of the European Health Data Space. A prerequisite for ATMPs is to recognize that evidence generation has to be all along the life cycle of medicine. The assessment of safety, efficacy, effectiveness for small population requires post-marketing authorization activities agreed and aligned between companies, manufacturers, regulators, assessor payers, with the relevant input, and I'll stress the relevant input of people living with rare diseases all along the way. The improvement of the infrastructure and the ability to access those treatments across border is of particular importance. We need transparent information on the process of selection of the centers that are delivering those therapies, with link to the ability to access care across border on the European provision, to ensure that these treatments are safe and of quality. In here, the role of the European Reference Network is extremely valuable. Particularly, the current provisions on access to cross-border care in relation to gene and cell therapies do not work efficiently. And I am witness of several occasions whereby the current regulation are not suited, or at least the interpretation of them are not suited to the access. Share best practices and recommendation on genetic testing and diagnostic. Greater coordination and, dare I say, harmonization of newborn screening in Europe is one of our, as EURORDIS, key advocacy goals. Our recently published principle for newborn screening wants to realize the vision that no families of a newborn with a rare disease should be left in uncertainty regarding their diagnosis, care, and treatment, regardless of where they are from in the European Union. And I conclude, Jackie, stressing that we have a great opportunity now to ensure that people, no matter where they are from in Europe, suffering from a rare disease, can access transformative treatment that are deemed of quality and they are safe. We need the willingness to engage, the willingness to change and make this opportunity future-proof. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And today all about discussing how to seize that opportunity, how to really make it work. You pointing to those 4 A's. We'll come back on all of those in our discussions later on. But thank you for now. Now my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Pauline May, Head of the Cell and Gene Therapy Facility at Leiden University Medical Center, to present some more of those Transform recommendations. Pauline, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie, and it really is an honor and a pleasure for me also to be here. And I think this really can be a start of bringing these exciting therapies to the patients. The coming 5 minutes, I will very shortly discuss the recommendations concerning the development and the regulatory requirements of ATMPs. And from the academic point of view, and also as author on the paper, ATMP paper of LERU, which is the League of European Research Universities, I can state that most of the recommendations are very well aligned with the recommendations we have made as universities in the LERU paper. The first recommendations concern the innovation ecosystem, and this needs to be improved. And this can be done by stimulating translational research and to stimulate universities, research centers, and industry to create partnerships where all partners benefit from. And in addition, the collaborative approaches in the area of defining high unmet medical needs really should be encouraged and promoted. The second group of recommendations concern the regulatory requirements. And it's really important to safeguard patient access to ATMPs by defining the appropriate regulatory requirements. And here we should think of different things. First, we should be open to and also develop innovative clinical trial designs in which outcomes that are important to patients are also captured. We should reinforce more patient-oriented design, planning and conduct of clinical trials. And in this, the new clinical trial regulation can be a first step. However, I would like to add here, with regard to the clinical trial regulation, that the interplay between the new clinical trial regulation, but also between the new medical device regulation and also the new in vitro diagnosis regulation should be clarified. The second part I would like to discuss with regard to regulation is that the requirements for therapies that contain or consist of a GMO should be reviewed. The environmental assessment should be simplified across the European countries, and very important, should be harmonized because we still see a lot of difference in this. The third thing with regard to the regulatory requirements I would like to discuss is that we need a consistent and harmonized implementation on the classification of different product groups. And this means harmonization on the criteria that classify between the blood, cells and tissues, ATMPs and medical devices. But the second, we also should harmonize criteria that classify between the different ATMPs, because we still see that a lot of variations in these classifications between the different member states. So we really should work on this. And the last part I would like to discuss in here is the hospital exemption. The hospital exemption is a very useful pathway for certain therapies to approach or to reach the patient. However, it is implemented in different ways within the European member states. I think it should be used as a bridge between different studies during product development, but it also can be very useful to bring products to the patient that are not suitable for marketing authorization. However, the use of the hospital exemption should be harmonized and a minimum set of standards should be set. And in addition, a registry should be created. So we really should create and achieve transparency around the hospital exemption. So I think I would like to finish here with regard to the recommendation. I really think that the Transform Alliance can really be a start to really bring these recommendations, to start to act on these recommendations. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you very much indeed, Pauline. And just to say, if any of you have any questions for Simone, for Pauline, or for our next speaker, they will be joining our panel after the break and you will be able to put your questions to them. So underlining there, those key elements of the regulation that you think need adapting, need changing, but also that collaborative approach. And that's what the Alliance is all about. These recommendations co-created by all of you together. It's all about that collaboration that is so important. How do we foster that in the future? Another issue to discuss. Let's complete the picture. Delighted to give the floor to Dr. Alexander Natz, Secretary General of the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, EUCOPE. Very warm welcome to you, Alexander, and over to you to complete the picture for us in terms of the recommendations that you as a group have developed.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Jackie. It's really a pleasure to be here. I really, first of all, would like to thank all the MEPs and all the people involved in the Transform team for setting this collaboration and partnership up. I think it's really a great opportunity, and we definitely have the need to talk more about transformative therapies, about cell and gene therapies. And it's really great that we could set this up in a very short period of time. We've heard a lot about the need for collaboration, the need for partnership, And I think the new therapies which we have seen, we see them more frequently coming to the market. When I look at a regulation which has passed in the year 2007 on ATMPs, in the early days of this regulation, we haven't seen so many products, but quite recently we've seen a lot of cell and gene therapies launched in Europe, and I think that's a very good sign. And we get them to our patients here in Europe. I think that's really most critical. I'm not aware of many cell and gene therapies which have been launched, but not launched in the EU. So I think that's first of all really something positive. I personally think that the EMA, if I may say that, is doing a good job in that respect. There's a lot of post-market follow-up obligations by companies to generate data. Especially the real-world data which has been mentioned before, that's happening in ATMPs. These obligations are there. Companies are committing to those obligations because those therapies, you could say, are very often more complex. If you look at an ex vivo gene therapy, for example, the logistics are very complex, and we have to take that into consideration and talk about why these therapies are really complex and could be potentially life-changing therapies. So I think that's really to start with something which I think is very positive. We also have to bear in mind that for those type of treatments, there are some shortcomings, and really I think I would also like to start with something Simone has mentioned before. We have existing legislation on cross-border healthcare in Europe since several years. There's two pieces of legislation, a regulation and a directive. But those pieces of legislation really don't work when it comes to cell and gene therapies, because for hospital treatments, we need to get the buy-in, we need to get the approval from the payers of those countries where the individual patient is insured. And this is really very often where I think there is a lack of understanding about the cross-border healthcare framework. I think we really have to educate better. We have to probably integrate the European reference networks, which have worked very successfully in the field of rare diseases, but we might have to connect them with the national contact points to educate better about the need for patients to have a speedy access to those type of therapies, because in many of those areas, we are talking about children, we are talking about genetic diseases, and if you have not reached certain milestones in the early years of your life, they won't come back. So we have to have speedy decision-making processes. I personally don't think that we necessarily have to change this legislation, but we have to get better in working with them. We have to make sure that we pay enough attention to some fears of some payers, which are reluctant to work with the existing legislation simply because the prices they would have to pay for a treatment abroad, and when I say abroad, it's still in Europe, they fear that they can't keep control about the cost, but that's not necessarily the case, because you can definitely have an informed decision about the costs involved in a gene therapy treatment in other countries. And especially when it comes to cell and gene therapies, cross-border healthcare is so critical, because at the end of the day, we can only treat patients where there's the expertise of certain physicians. And when you have a certain expertise in a certain disease area, especially in rare diseases, it's really complex. You don't have so many experts in these fields of rare and ultra rare diseases. But if then on top of that, you need to have also some expertise in administering cell and gene therapies, that's something you don't find in even in the specialized university hospitals across Europe. So we will be confronted with a situation where we only have few centers in certain countries, and we might have smaller countries which are not having the expertise to administer those therapies. And given that context, we have to move the patient to where the experts, the centers of excellence are, and also allow, of course, for reimbursement, because those are therapies which patients cannot pay out of their own pocket. So I think that's really a call for having a collaboration also with the institutions, really to have further calls with the European Commission about how can we make the administration of the cross-border healthcare framework better when it comes to advanced therapies, to cell and gene therapies. And the second point I'd like to mention is what we see here in cell and gene therapies is also what's new here is we see more of what we call innovative payment models. We see more of outcome-based guarantees, which are given by companies to to the payers. And given the fact that it's a one-time treatment and the payment is due when the therapy is administered to the patient, I think we have to really make sure that we hedge the risk of the payers here. And this is what we are seeing in many ATMPs and many cell and gene therapies, that there are certain outcome guarantees in place. And I would hope that also in a framework of a collaboration, there is an openness to sign those type of outcome guarantees. If certain outcome parameter, which can be defined between the company bringing the product to the market and the payer, if certain outcome parameters are not met, then there is a payback guarantee. Certain amounts, 80% is going to be paid back because the therapy has not lasted for the 6 or 10 or 15 years, which have been which it has been supposed to last. So there are options on the table. And last but not least, the third solution really here, or second solution, better to say, has also been mentioned, I think, by Simone. Real world evidence. I think industry is very much committed to put real world evidence data to the table. Data we call real world evidence data, which is to be generated after the product has been exposed to a wider patient population, when the product has been released to the market. So I think that's another solution. We need to close data gaps, which industry is putting at the table. And last but not least, I just talked about a third solution. I think we have to talk more about risk pools. For example, in Germany, there's a risk pool hedging the risk of the individual insurances. If you have more than one or more than 3 of those patients and you're a very small insurance, you're not supposed to carry all the risk when other bigger insurances have fewer patients. So we have to hedge the risk, and these type of risk pools can be very efficient in this way. Let me conclude by really saying thanks to all people involved, to the Transform team, to all the members of the European Parliament in this project. And I'm also really delighted to see so many patient organizations in this project. There is more to be discussed, and representing industry here, we have many cell and gene therapy companies. It's really an important topic to be talked about over the next months and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much there. And those recommendations also focusing on that crucial issue of the sustainability of healthcare systems, and how do we really make this work in a way that works for the healthcare systems as well as for the individual patients. And you raised interesting questions linking to what Simone said about the cross-border aspect. Intrigued to know whether our panel later on think you're right, we don't need to change the regulations, we just need to make them work better, or do we need some more fundamental change to ensure? And very much all of you highlighting what is special, what is specific about these transformative therapies that mean that we need to adapt the framework to meet those specificities. Lots to come back to in our discussion. And as I said, all three, Pauline, Simone and Alexander, will be joining our panel after we've heard from the policymakers. So if you have any questions for them or comments to what you've heard, please do get them coming in. Remember, you can write them in the chat part of the Slido tab. And I also should mention that the Transform recommendations that you've just heard are available for download on the website. They've been uploaded while we've been speaking. But before we go any further, let's have a look at the word cloud and see what words you used to describe the biggest, what you think is the biggest priority for the agenda. And that word access, absolutely central, and accessibility. So if you put those two together, far and away would be the biggest word in this cloud. That cross-border aspect coming through very strongly. And of course, the absolute essential feature, we have to make sure that they are safe. We have others, coherent worldwide approach. So not just harmonized at an EU level, but calling for coherence on a global level. Patient involvement, we'll come back on that issue, and patients mentioned again, trust, transparency, data, the role of HTAs in all of this, system readiness, the infrastructure question linked to that real world evidence, BTC-based innovation in hospitals and revision of BTC legislation, and not just cross-border healthcare, by the way, but also cross-border knowledge exchange. So as we've heard, limited expertise in a limited number of centers, but how do we build that expertise as we go along? Thank you very much for that. Lots to come back to in our discussions. We're going to have a short intermezzo, let me call it, now, because we wanted to hear from some of the other MEPs who have joined the interest group. So we're going to watch a video with some comments from them about why they think this issue is so important, why this is a timely moment to be discussing it. And then we'll come back, we're going to hear from some policymakers, and we will also, as I say, then launch a panel with questions from me to our panel, but also, I hope, from all of you. And we'll be joined by some other Alliance members to answer some of those questions as well. So let's hear what those MEPs have to say.
My name is Claudia Gamon and I'm a founding member of the Alliance for Transformative Therapies. To start this off, I want to quickly explain what the Alliance is actually all about. Gene therapies hold the promise to transform the lives of patients suffering from debilitating and often life-threatening genetic disorders. However, these innovative therapies face a number of barriers to really reach all the patients that they should reach. And our Alliance aims to eliminate these barriers by fostering an effective dialogue around gene and cell therapies and providing evidence-based recommendations such as the one today. I'm very committed to this cause because I really believe in the transformative nature of innovation, especially when it comes to cell and gene therapies. These treatment options should be available and accessible for all patients in Europe, and this brings me to my key personal priority in the Alliance, and that is accessibility. Our key priority must be to ensure that transformative therapies are easily accessible to patients in financial and in practical terms. And the ongoing COVID crisis really showed us how important it is to enable these innovations and milestones, so I'm happy to continue to work on this important project. I sincerely hope that we can continue to lift and increase awareness and trigger a change for the patients and their families. Thank you.
Coming from Czech Republic, the homeland of Gregor Mendel, the founder of genetic science, I'm fully committed to the Transform activities. The transformative therapies represent not only a great opportunity for European biotech industries and research, but also they represent a choice for patients to use innovative therapies for tackling life-threatening diseases. Therefore, we must ensure stable EU legislation to guarantee the access of EU patients to these innovative therapies.
As one of the first supporters of the Transform MEP interest group, I truly believe in the potential of transformative therapies. Novel therapies are not a pipe dream anymore. Several cell and gene therapies have already been approved by the European Medicines Agency and are helping patients today. The promise of transformative therapies is undeniable, and as a member of the Transform MEP interest group, I am committed to ensure that the European Union puts in place policies that facilitate safe and timely patient access to these treatments.
Transformative therapies are the present, not the future. They offer the new hope to thousands of patients suffering from unmet medical needs. In the line with the Europeans' call for stronger European Health Union, the EU must create its fit-for-purpose legislative and regulatory framework that allows patients to benefit from these highly innovative therapies with life-changing potential. As a member of Transform Interest Group, I will work tirelessly to support the EU in seizing the opportunity that Transformative Therapies offer.
Until recently, cell and gene therapies were considered science fiction, but today they are a reality and they can reshape the way we cure and we treat a whole bunch of diseases. I'm very proud to be a member of the Transform MEP interest group, which aims to set a regulatory and judiciary framework in order to have all these new cures available to all the European citizens. Thank you.
Advanced therapies based on genes, tissues or cells are already offering groundbreaking new opportunities for the treatment of disease and injury. In the context of the pharmaceutical strategy for Europe and the revision of the general pharmaceutical legislation, together with other members of the European Parliament, we are advocating for a innovative regulatory framework that guarantees the highest safety and the quality standards for these technologies, catalyzes innovation, and ensures a rapid and affordable access for all patients.
Together with many colleagues of the European Parliament, I support Transform in raising awareness on the potential of transformative therapies. Cell and gene therapies can change people's lives, and we have the duty to ensure safe and timely access to all patients around Europe.
Thanks to groundbreaking work in gene and cell therapies, what once was a dream is coming closer to reality. This gives tremendous hope to patients. I am very committed to contribute to the work of Transform, the MEP interest group on transformative therapies. Together, we can make a difference and ensure that patients all over Europe can benefit from the potential of these innovative treatments.
Advanced therapies medicinal products, also known as ATMPs, are a medical revolution that can bring new hope for the treatment of disease and injury, with the promise to improve the management of the systems of severe disabling or life-limiting conditions. These treatments can transform and save lives. I am proud to be a member of the Transform MEP interest group.
Recent advances in technology have the capacity to deliver hope for citizens through the use of innovative cell and gene therapies. These technologies must be made available to all citizens in a timely and efficient manner. They are relying on political leaders such as MEPs to do what is needed to make it a reality. I'm really proud to be working with a group of colleagues from the Transform MEP interest group in the Parliament to advance the case of these new revolutionary therapies.
So we heard there, underlined by all the MEPs, the enormous potential of these therapies to really change lives, to offer new hope, as was said. Also very struck, going back to something Alexander said in his intervention about this is with us now. It's not a pipe dream. We're talking about the present, not the future. And indeed, we have those predictions that 5 to 10 new therapies will be coming on stream every year from 2025. So this is now. And for the MEPs, the crucial question they're asking themselves, that how do we eliminate the barriers to ensure that these transformative therapies, once, as Alessandro Moretti said at the beginning, they have proven their worth, they have proven their benefit, how do we make sure they reach the patients they should reach? And how do we seize the opportunity of the pharmaceutical strategy to shape that policy and legislative framework to achieve this? Delighted to welcome, we have three speakers in this session before we move to our interactive panel. Our first speaker is Dolores Montserrat, MEP. She's a member of the European Parliament's Environment, Public Health and Food Safety Committee and rapporteur for the European Parliament's own initiative report on the pharmaceutical strategy. She's also a former Spanish health minister. So no one could be better to talk to us about this than her. Dolores, thank you so much for being with us today, and over to you. Just having a little bit of unmuting challenge here. It will happen. It will happen. There should be. There we go. Over to you. No, you did it again. You muted again. I don't know what you did, but you were unmuted and then you muted. Oh, the joys of
now.
We can hear you beautifully, Dolores. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And for me, it's a pleasure to be here with Transfer, with Alessandra and the MEP interest group on transformative therapies for inviting me to join this event today. For me, I'm going to explain the scopes that we have to achieve. First, we need to put patients at the center of all health policies to ensure that they are informed and involved at every stage of the care pathway. The second point is supporting a competitive and innovative European Union pharmaceutical industry while ensuring sustainability of the national healthcare systems and protecting the supply chain. Thirdly, it is crucial to increase European Union resilience and crisis preparedness by preventing shortage, sharing information, and ensuring a constant dialogue among players in the pharmaceutical value chain, public authorities, non-governmental patients and health organizations, and the research community. The final point calls for in the strategy, I'm calling for the European Union to be a world leader in healthcare and to continue working with the WHO to standardize effective, safe, and sustainable regulatory frameworks for medicinal products. Breakthrough innovations like cell and gene therapy represent a great hope for many patients, especially the ones that currently have no treatment options. So to allow all the European citizens safely and equally access these new frontier treatments, we identify challenge and potential solutions that will be included in the final report in the strategy that we're doing now in the Parliament. Let me focus on some of them. First, on the regulatory environment. We need a more stable, flexible, agile, and fit-for-purpose regulatory framework, sustainable for cell and gene therapies to develop and be broadly applied and to guide new business models. At the same time, we should run information campaigns to raise awareness and encourage the use of these innovations. Secondly, on clinical trials. The framework for clinical trials should ensure that clinical trials are more patient-centered, as well as allow the use of innovative designs, in particular for therapies targeting small populations. This links to the third point on digital. Patients can benefit tremendously if we upscale the European Union infrastructure and allow for sharing of interoperable healthcare data, including real-world evidence. The creation of the European health data space is critical to deliver to patients. And finally, there is a high cost behind the development of cell and gene therapies, and these investments are needed to deliver safe, effective, and high-quality medicines. Public-private partnerships for research and development of innovative medicine should play a big role in the ecosystem for innovation. Despite the value of the treatments to patients, the high prices are a challenge for the sustainability of the healthcare systems. Cell and gene therapies can contribute to it, together with new criteria for the pricing systems and with adapting price to the therapeutical value and the primary needs of the population. So the pharmaceutical industry is of strategic importance to Europe, and SMEs have a big role to play in this context, as they can innovative quickly and foster new emerging forms of manufacturing that could speed up production times, reduce costs, facilitate greater access. On a global level, we call for a level playing field and a regulatory framework facilitating trade agreements that prize innovation-based competitiveness. So the European Union pharmaceutical legislation needs to be adapted to cutting-edge products and therapies following scientific advance and technological transformation. We cannot lag behind. So thank you once again for the invitation, and I wish the Transform MEP interest group a fruitful work in the coming months and years to come as we look to shape together the new European pharmaceutical legislative framework. And I'm sure that this decade that we just started is very important for the public health of all European citizens and from all around the world. So now we have a big opportunity to work all together in all these new therapies that for me, they are my right call. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dolores. And as you say, a big opportunity right now, collaboration, partnership, those words already resonating through all of our discussions. And I know you can't stay with us for long, but I do hope to be able to squeeze in a question or two to you before you have to leave us. But let us turn now, we've heard from a policy maker, let's turn to a policy implementer. Someone who has to make it happen. And warm words were said earlier by Alexander about the European Medicines Agency's role here. Delighted to welcome Dr. Anna Hidalgo-Simon, Head of Advanced Therapies at the EMA. Your opening thoughts, Anna.
Thank you very much to the organizers and to you, Jackie. It's great to be here today. I have a difficult job because I have been asked to give you in 5 minutes a little bit of an overview. And this slide will help me to do so. So every line is a therapy, and they are in 3 color stripes, which are the 3 different types of therapies that we have under this umbrella of advanced therapies. They have been calling them the gene and cell therapies. So gene therapies at the top, the cell therapies in the middle pink, and the bottom are the tissue engineering products. So I can tell you now that the top, the gene therapies are the current winners. It is where we have more approved. They are more common, and we can see in the pipeline that these are the type of therapies that are really coming now. They are mature, they are arriving now to patients. I agree with the previous comments that this is really the time for these therapies. But I want to just draw your attention to one thing. Not all the lines are still ongoing. Those are products that were approved, were in the market, and they are not anymore. Sometimes the company pulls out, and sometimes they just don't apply for the renewal. So they are all gone out of the market because of commercial non-viability for the companies. We didn't have any safety or any emergency that we need to pull them. We have one drug at the moment suspended because it's a question mark on a safety issue, but basically it's a commercial reason why these drugs are not in the market. And that pulls me back to what people ask, what can we do to make this better? Well, we need to make this sustainable and affordable for everybody. This idea that these are the therapies that need to get out there to every patient that need it in Europe is easier said than done, because they are very new. They don't fit sometimes that clearly in the health systems, and they need to fit with the reimbursement and with the payment system and all the insurance and everything. They have a lot to fit because they are very new. So they came with a big promise and with some other ways to get to know. So this multitasking, stakeholder group is phenomenal, because if we are going to make this work, we really need to work together. And this is from the academic developers to the big companies, to the SMEs, to all the patients, the regulators, the HTA, the payers, the policymakers. We really need to go together. So this is an excellent initiative. I'm very, very happy to collaborate with you. A little bit on how are we doing compared with the rest of the world. There are many other places developing an approval. From the regulatory point of view, we have a very good number in the market, as you can see from that slide. By the way, the slide is already gone. I'm sure we can get it later on. The idea of having different classifications in different parts of Europe means that it's very difficult to compare. For example, the FDA has quite a few areas, drugs in this area that for us are under the blood or transplant system. So the numbers don't really matter, but we have a lot in Europe. We are at the top of the numbers of approvals and at the top of the numbers in the market. Now, there are other areas where we have less. For example, the academic initial development is fantastic. We have the universities, the hospitals, the clinicians, investigators, the IMIs, the Horizon will have a lot of investment and a lot of ideas. And sometimes they are medicines, sometimes they are methods, sometimes they are diagnostic companion, they are delivery systems. So not just medicine, it's a full environmental or scientific progress really taking off. Now, the clinical trials part is less attractive. They are a lot of the time going to America or to the Far East. That's something that we really need to look at and make it better. Now, at the other end, we have a lot to do. The average time between one ATMP to be approved for that ATMP to be in the patients is much longer than for any other therapies. With some small chemicals, the launch is immediately after approval. For certain TMPs, you have a year gap. So it's not just how long does it take, and then how many patients do we reach? And are we really making the best of this therapy for everybody? Those are some of the challenges that we need to do. From the harmonization and global point of view, we talk a lot with other regulators. So we cannot harmonize immediately, and the harmonization always will have some limits because we are very different and we have very different frameworks. But we are talking a lot, and we will be moving in the direction of making as harmonized as we can go. Then the promise of what happened after is very important. If I have to put one thought in your mind, is go back to that idea of let's see the evidence and only put in the market and fight for access for the ones who have a proven evidence packet that say this is good. It's very tempting to go a little bit faster or be a little bit braver, but we really need to stay with the evidence because we really want effective but safe as well. So we need to put it all together. And again, we will continue talking about the real world evidence, about all the fantastic opportunities that we have to move these therapies ahead. Thank you, Jackie. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna, and lots to come back to in our discussion. I'm very struck by what you said about, yes, we need to make it sustainable, we need to make it affordable, but it's easier said than done. So some of the challenges related to that, and you pointed to why it's easier said than done, I hope we'll come back to in our discussion. We also wanted to hear from a national policymaker, and Dr. Gaetano Guglielmi, who is Deputy Director General for Health Research and Innovation in the Italian Ministry of Health, couldn't be with us because of connection issues. Oh, the joys of internet webinars. But he did want to talk to us, so he recorded this video message. So let's hear what he has to say.
Good morning. My name is Gaetano Guglielmi. I am the Deputy General Director of the Italian Ministry of Health General Directorate for Health Research. Transforming medicine can change dramatically the opportunity for our patient to solve the critical situation that in the past we don't have a therapy for this solution. For example, the new medicine for some kind of cancer or the new medicine for some rare disease that can offer a solution, not a symptomatic approach, but a solution for this disease. The research on this sector can offer new therapy and new opportunity in different areas and solve great social problems in our country. Unfortunately, at the moment, this approach have an aspect too important to take in consideration, the economic aspect, because today the cost of this therapy could create critical situation in our public health national system, because there is a possible risk that for economic reason we select the type of patient to offer this kind of therapy. This is not possible in ethical approach of the government of the health system. Now is important that we found a common solution to reduce this aspect. And one of this solution is to create a connection between academic and research institution and the industry and the manufacturer, because only in this way we can reduce the development cost that in this moment is very high, and also to have solution for a fast production of this new research therapy. Our research center worked very well and hard in this sector, but it's necessary to increase the capacity of this research and transfer this research directly to the patient. And only the connection in public-private can offer this solution for the future, and also to obtain also a reduction of the cost that can create compatible with the budget of our public health system this new opportunity. At the moment, only the connection between different research centers can help us to increase the potential of this gene therapy, because it's necessary to create the condition and also to modify the regulatory aspect that in this moment cannot help us to have a fast production or fast test of this aspect. Another condition is to reduce the inaccurate use of the new therapy, because in this moment it's clear that when we have a new therapy, all the patients intend to use it, but it's more important to create social conditions for explain which kind of patient can have a real result of this medicine. For this aspect, it's very important to create a new methodology approach to ensure which therapy are safe and in particular demonstrate their benefit for the life of the patient. Thank you very much for your attention.
So Gaetano Guglielmi there, giving us a perspective and coming back to this issue of the economic cost, warning it could be critical for the sustainability of healthcare systems. Also pointing to that issue when Anna said, we mustn't be tempted to jump at these things. They must have proven benefits, tempting as it is to go for them fast. I want to come back on all of those issues and again stressing the importance of collaboration, of partnership, public-private, to address these issues. Lots to discuss. We're going to lose Dolores in about 3 minutes. So Dolores, I just wanted to quickly come back to you before you have to leave us. And in that time also, the other panelists will join us. But Dolores, I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned a number of issues, a number of areas where you'll be focusing your attention. And you said it was a big opportunity to work together. For you, what is the key next step and the most important of those issues if we are to really make progress in adapting the framework and getting this right in time? Because as we heard from many MEPs as well, these things are already coming. Anna showed us that slide, and they'll come more and more. What for you is the key priority?
Perhaps the key priority is to have this new pharmaceutical strategy in Europe. In this strategy, we are going to pending a lot of directive. So this strategy is going to give us the big opportunity to fit for proposed regulatory frameworks sustainable for cell and gene therapies, to develop and be broadly applied. So I think so that perhaps the most important thing in all Europe is to have a regulatory framework and this strategy, this pharmaceutical strategy, that inside we include all these new therapies, that they are a miracle, and in the same time they help so much for the sustainability of the systems. For me, it's very important. Always I'm explaining that Europe has a big thing that it's really different of China and United States, that it's our national health system. So we have to protect them. So we have to make them to be sustainability in the future. And I think that these therapies with the regulatory framework, they are going to help so much in this sustainability of the system. So always we have to have three priorities: the patients, and they have to access to all therapies, of course these therapies too. Second, we have to have the regulatory framework. Third, we have to maintain and protect the sustainability of our systems. Why? Because like that, we are not going to leave behind any European citizen. I'm explaining that in the United States in the last decade, they lose life expectancy. Why? Because they have a big border to get in the health system. And they don't have a public health system. And in our case, Europe is the first continent with the most, with the more life expectancy. And why? One of the cases is because we have our national systems are universal and we never leave behind anybody. So, you know, we have to put in this big balance patients, our health systems, and new access for everybody in these new therapies. So this is the reason that we need the strategy, the pharmaceutical strategy, and at the same time, we need a regulatory framework from these therapies.
Thank you very much indeed. Dolores, I know you have to leave us, but we are very grateful. It's been great to have you with us. So back with me now, Anna Hidalgo Simon, Simone Boselli, Alexander Natz, and Pauline May for our discussion. And as I say, I will, over the next 50 minutes or so, also be asking some other members of the Transform Alliance to join us to answer a few questions. And if you have a question, please remember, use the Slido tab and the chat function, and you can put your question. Please do also tell me who you represent. That would be very useful to know. But let us dive straight in. And I want to pick up first where Dolores ended when she emphasized putting patients at the center of all policies. The Transform recommendations talk about a patient-centric innovation ecosystem. And I wanted to ask, and Simone, as a patient group, I'd like to come to you first. What does that mean? What does it look like in practice, a genuinely patient-centric innovation ecosystem?
Thank you very much, Jackie. That's probably a question to be directed to patient representatives, isn't it? I think the main thing is that the patient input is now very relevant and very expert. The EMA, Hannah can testify that, is requesting structurally the input from patient experts all along the most of the regulatory framework, and the importance of the patient input is very recognized within the regulatory system. Now, this is not very well structured outside the regulatory system. There are also some things that could be done better also at the EMA level. That's always we strive for better, but elsewhere is not that structured, particularly, for example, in HTA. Now, my point being is the meaningful patient engagement means to have a patient point of view from the very beginning and along the life cycle of developmental therapies, particularly when it comes to defining what the unmet needs are, what are the patient-relevant outcomes and patient-relevant experience that a therapy could change, what is the impact on the family, what are the other, what is the impact of on the life of a patient. In this sense, those input needs to be introduced at all stages of development, when it starts in basic research with the academia, when it comes to translation research and it goes into larger clinical trials. And clearly, in recent experience, clearly when we heard that companies have asked for meaningful patient input later in the stage, we'll say, oh, we should ask you earlier. And then it helps co-developing also with the regulators, thanks to their engagement, co-developing or co-creating in a way a path for a rare disease therapy. Post-authorization, sorry, just last thing, post-evidence generation, particularly on gene therapies, patient-reported outcomes collected through new methods of ICTs, wearables, etc., are important, because guess what? Some expert centers will give the therapies to people that do not live in the country. How do we follow up with that? Do we need to follow that up to 3 months in that expert? No. So there is an effort to be done to make sure that patient-reported outcomes are appropriately collected.
Thank you very much. And I want to come back on that patient-recorded outcomes, the whole question of real-world evidence in a moment. But Pauline, you talked about patients being involved in the design of clinical trials, in the implementation of them, and so on. What for you does a genuinely patient-centered, because again, it's one of those things, to borrow from what Anna said in another context, easy to say, not always so easy to do.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. And I certainly can also discuss this question, and I will discuss it in that from the point of view from the product development. And I think one very important recommendation of this paper, which I also fully endorse, is that the translational research pathway should be improved. So we should, as is very nicely stated in the paper, we should break down the silos. So for this, we need to define an optimal collaboration between all stakeholders. And that's not only researchers and industry, but it's regulators, it's the clinicians, it's the hospitals, but also very important, it's also the patients. So we really should recognize each other's expertises, and we also should use each other's expertise in the most optimal way. And I think it's very important that we define an optimal way of collaboration. And then going back to what Anna said, this is really easily said, that we should collaborate, but that's of course not easily done because we have to deal with different interests of all stakeholders. And I think that the Alliance can play a very important role in this, in how these collaborations can be formalized, and that the Alliance also can safeguard in the end that the interest of the patient is the most important one in this whole perspective. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you in a minute, Anna, but I wanted to come to Alexander first in terms of that point Pauline is making. I mean, this alliance and these recommendations that you were presenting to us earlier have been produced through a process of co-creation involving patient groups and everyone else. How important is it to you from an industry perspective, this co-creation of recommendations in this area and making sure that the patient genuinely is at the center of all of this? You
Jackie,
need to.
Thanks, Jackie, for the question. It's critical. I mean, it's even like in any medicine development, we need a patient's voice, as Simone has said from the beginning. It's really critical when it comes to patient design that we are listening to patients up to the end of the life cycle, as we call it, of a medicine, of a product, up to the reimbursement. I mean, it's really important also that in HTA procedures, just to give another example, there is a patient voice, and there's good news in this respect that the Commission HTA proposal, I think personally, values patient involvement more than many other national HTA procedures. And I think that's really critical, because at the end of the day, it's all stakeholders which are involved, also physicians, of course, but also patients need to be involved in the development phase and also in reimbursement decisions.
Thank you. And Anna, I mean, I don't know whether you could specifically comment also to the HTA proposal and this issue of how it deals with patients, because Alexander's saying they're groundbreaking in a way compared with many national approaches.
Yeah, well, I would like to put something back onto the table, because it's very clear that they are key, that they are already playing an important role, and that role should grow. But they actually really need support, and they need to learn a lot. We need these intelligent, well-educated, committed, willing to work patients, and that's a lot to ask. We find that through the years of involvement with them, they get trained, they get learned, but they do real heavy lifting work in this as well. So they do need support and funding and the organization. So perhaps it's something that we all agree is important. Now we all agree how to do best.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to come back on this issue, and Simone just mentioned it in terms of real world evidence. And when we're talking about, we've heard two things, obviously absolutely central, the issue of safety. And the other point that's been made over and again, right from the start from Alessandra Moretti as well, is you need to demonstrate the benefits. And that also is absolutely essential before you then look to see how you can make sure patients have access. And I just wondered, in terms of real world data, and Alexander, perhaps this time I could come to you first. How do you see the role of real world data, real world evidence, and linking this to the health data space, the European health data space? How much difference do you think that is going to make? And you underlined earlier how important this is, because in this case, we only have real world evidence often because it's a one-off therapy. You get your evidence afterwards. What are the particular challenges here, and how can we best meet them?
Thanks, Jackie. It's a very important question. And to me, it's one of the solutions to bring those therapies to patients is real world evidence. And in the regulatory sphere, we are used to collect real-world evidence, which is what we call after the product has been launched to the market. We have seen post-authorization safety and efficacy studies. We have seen that used for, I think, more than 10 years, and I think Anna and the colleagues in EMA know much better than me. But this is a tool which is frequently used in regulatory processes. Now, what I think where it's also very important is in pricing and reimbursement processes, because there it's a bit more new, this tool of real-world evidence. And it's an important tool because when we are talking about one-off treatments, one-time therapies, we are looking much more into the future than when we are talking about chronic treatment options. And we've heard from many HTA decision makers, also from payers, that at the time of launch, that industry has not data for the next 20 years, because we are talking about rare diseases, ultra rare diseases, where the territory is very much unknown, and there is not data for the next 15 to 20 years. But on the other side, we have to understand the demand of the payers to generate this data, and there needs to be a commitment from industry to generate this data. And this is really what we would like to offer. This is really also something we are seeing in important member states and bigger member states, that there are also requirements from payers to obligate companies to generate real-world evidence, and we are fully committed to do that. The request needs to stay reasonable in a way. We can't have 27 different registries one for each member state. On top of that, there might be a registry requirement from EMA, so we end up with 28. That's a bit difficult to do. So I think we have to discuss at the EU level in a form of a collaboration together with EMA. What is the need of the regulator? Okay, how can we see that we meet that need? What is the need from the payers? What type of data do they want to see? And bringing in also physicians and patients into that decision-making process to construct in an ideal scenario 1 or 2 registries, but not 5 or 6 or 10 or even 27 of them. That's a bit something that's not a bit. I think that's something which is rather unfeasible to do. We are talking about 1 HTA and then having 27 registries. And the last point on this one, as I said before, we are very much committed to generate this data. We shouldn't close our eyes. We should also look at this data, but this data is not there to replace RCT data. What we put on the table when we are talking about HTA decisions, it's not there to replace. It's there to add on to this data set which we are submitting in HTA procedures.
Thank you. And Anna, same question to you, and that relationship between the randomized clinical trial data, the real world evidence, as we've heard here, very specific characteristics of these therapies that mean real world evidence is vital. How do you see the role of the European health data space in all of this?
I'm so glad you came to me straight after Alexander, because I didn't like what you were saying there. The regulators and HTAs, nobody will want 27 registries. We want 1. Because we all need the data together. So it's normally the companies, the ones who prefer to have their own registry rather than to join the common one. So the game is exactly the opposite of the could be read. We really want real world evidence that can be used. But we are moving on a little bit. The traditional space for real world evidence is the post-authorization, as Alexander very clearly just explained. Now we are thinking for ATMPs, we need more. We need to use real world evidence at the moment of authorization. Perhaps we have really few patients and we have to have a natural history of the disease coming from somewhere else. And we need to have real world evidence to help developers, to start from the beginning to see where are the gaps, where are the needs. So we are using in a way real world evidence to lower the uncertainty, not just to balance or to complement. Going for the clinical trials and the randomized is still best for regulators and for HTAs. You can compare with and without. But in ATMPs, sometimes, especially the ultra rare, we're just never going to get there. So it's a very fine balance of knowing when you really cannot get there, and sometimes it's you could, but it's easier to do the other one. That's not acceptable. But also to be able to have something else that you can complement. And then the continuous of the collection for evidence and for safety. At the moment, we are having 15 years normally with ATMPs. But sometimes the claim is forever, and it's very difficult to measure forever.
So there's a particular challenge of these very, in some cases, small patient populations, which make this, as you say, a very tricky balance. I wanted to bring in here Dr. Carmelo Rizzari, who is president-elect and a board member at the European Society for Pediatric Oncology, CIOPE, if Carmelo is there. Hello, Carmelo.
Hello.
I wanted really to put the same question to you, if I might, in terms of what evidence should we be using, both in terms of the safety question, but also in terms of the demonstration of benefits. You've been listening to the conversation so far.
Yeah.
Your reaction?
No, well, I cannot be more in agreement with Anna because I am a pediatric oncologist. So I'm treating patients, children with deadly diseases. So the level of the evidence for some of these diseases cannot be the traditional one. There is no way to have a randomized trials for very rare or ultra rare diseases. So we have to accept that some limitations in the conducting of preclinical trials should be accepted. On the other side, we have to be very carefully for the safety of the patients. So all this data should be made available for the whole scientific community. And I also would like to add that the parents, because we deal with parents as well, and the patients need to be in some way also educated to what are their expectations from these miraculous treatments. So safety, efficacy should be very well monitored. And for children, let me just say these final words. It is extremely important that our kids will be followed over the time, and the scientific community needs to be aware of short, medium, and long-term effects. Our kids, patients today, will be the men and the women of the future. So we need to know what will happen for them in the future.
Thank you very much indeed, Carmelo. Great to hear from you this afternoon. Simone, if I could come to you, and when we're talking here about evidence, I wanted to broaden this question out more generally into how patients see these therapies. Is it all, are they seeing just the enormous potential that they have, or are there some concerns about safety, about benefits that we need to address? And if there are, how do we do it? And how do you see that evidence question we were just discussing fitting into that picture?
Oh, well, thank you very much for the question, Jackie. It is clear that what as patients see, and clearly, particularly in pediatric situation, where we have some diseases like SMA, which until 2-3 years ago was the main cause of death for genetic disorder in babies under 2 years of age. Clearly, parents can quickly determine what are the benefits and the risk associated with the therapy. And clearly, this is something that parents and patients alike are able to judge very quickly and what type of risk we are ready to associate. But in any case, there are some concerns that are coming also from our patient community in relation to the information that are provided, particularly when it comes to clinical trials around the safety and what it needs to be done. There are also concerns, and in some cases when patients have been asked for their input and have provided the input to the company, that was not followed up appropriately, resulting in some adverse events, particularly when it comes to provide these therapies in appropriate centers that are treating the specific disease, where people are used to try the side effects that potentially arise in a specific disease. And this is entirely possible. In the majority of the cases, they do represent a hope. Clearly, there is another point that needs to be, and here that's why we're talking about transformative, not curative in a sense, because we know that these treatments are potentially transformative, but we have seen in the past narrative that has sold some therapies as curative, while with the evidence that comes down the line, we understand they are transformative, not yet curative, because of course, the disease being genetic has already taken hold of the life of a baby in particular, and certainly that life compared to the natural history data is changed but not cured, and that is important to note in the communication with patients.
Thank you very much indeed. I want again to bring in a couple more Alliance members at this point and get their views on this question of the view of the patient. So I'd like, if it is possible, to talk to Delphine Heenan, who is European Affairs Lead and Committee Member in the Childhood Cancer International Europe CCIE and KIC Cancer. Delphine, great to have you with us. In terms of addressing patient concerns and that balance of the great hope these therapies bring, but also the concerns they may raise. How do you see that issue?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for giving us the possibility to speak on behalf of patients. And I would like to underline first that this is a really great initiative, and everything that's been said so far, and it feels like I'm not going to have much added value, is actually pretty much on the point. Everything that the position paper by the Transformative Alliance is completely in line with us. And I will say that the main benefits that we see as representatives of children with cancer is the actual chance to cure more children. Transformative therapies have really shown a great edge for some types of pediatric cancer that they have proven completely incurable so far. And some of the greatest hopes that we have, especially the CAR T cells, are really, giving hope to many families and patients who are striving to cure cancer. But it's also a great hope to reduce toxicity of the current treatments, because we all know that young patients with cancer are currently being treated with chemotherapy mostly, or aggressive surgery and radiotherapy. All of these treatments have a long-lasting impact on the life of these young patients, and 2/3 of them will suffer from long-term side effects in their daily, and for half of them, it will be in their daily lives. And if they can be avoided with less toxic therapies, it's really a great advantage for our communities. And that's why the point made by Carmelo early on about the long-term follow-up of patients, to ensure that we track what cell gene therapy can change and how they can impact the long-term life and quality of life of patients, is also crucial in what is going on. So we see cell gene therapies as a great opportunity, first of all, but also we see that as a great risk of deepening the unbalance between the western part of Europe and the eastern part of Europe, where we already have today a difference in the cure rates and the access to innovative drugs for the patients. And access really have to be at the heart of is really at the heart.
So that equality of access, and access was the word in the word cloud that people chose more. So access and accessibility, that equality of access across Europe, a crucial issue for you, Delphine. I wanted to bring in now Professor Marcela Votrubo, who is a board member at the European Alliance for Vision Research and Ophthalmology, EUI. Marcela, great to have you with us. Your thoughts on this question?
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very honoured to be able to speak today on behalf of EUI, but also as an ophthalmologist and as a clinician, and give you a few vignettes, perhaps from the perspective of patients with eye disease, which is one of the big areas where we are seeing with the potential for impact for gene and cellular therapies, and indeed the first licensed gene therapy product. So we have essentially patients who are in a state of absolute enthusiasm and delight, but also despair, because they have for so long had no therapies available to them at all. And in these rare diseases, and by and large, we're talking about rare diseases, we have a population of patients with very low expectations at the moment, but with a huge level of interest. And in every single clinic, every week, I have to discuss these matters. And I could really endorse everything you've said here. We've touched on absolutely every aspect that the patients ask about. I think one thing that's very important is that the patient's views are sometimes, as we've heard, untutored, and they need the opportunity to learn, be educated and supported. So I don't speak for the patient organizations or advocates, but I know that patients have a lot of questions and they have very few places on the whole to go for answers. So they need that. Our patients are facing a lifetime of blindness with a huge unmet need. The value of any therapy for them would be huge. but I think we need to realize that it's not going to be the case that all patients will be treatable. So this has been touched on. Many of my patients think that they will be treatable when they are in an advanced stage of the disease. So we have to establish realistic natural history evidence for each disease, and there's often not very much natural history data. We have to be able to stratify patients, not just by which disease or gene or stage of disease they're at, but what suitable treatment would be available for them, and then manage their expectations appropriately to give them the power to understand what might work for them. So their views are very positive, and I don't want this whole revolution to somehow lead to disillusionment, which I think would be a very bad thing. We've got people who really want to work with us, patients keen to take part.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Marcella. Lots to think about. Panel, would any of you like to react to what you've heard before we move on? I want to come to the issue really that Anna raised in terms of the challenges in bringing therapies to markets, and the fact that some, as she said, are no longer with us, have been withdrawn and so on, and this idea about innovative payment models that Alexander raised. But before we do, anybody want to react to what we heard from our patient representatives?
If I may, Jackie, I would like to stress that we as urologists are looking at empowering the patient organization and trying to do our best with our open academy program, which contains 2 winter school and summer school that deal specifically, the winter school, with scientific development, including translational research and gene therapies, as well as the summer school, which deals with empowering patients into getting into regulatory and HTA discussion. The summer school has trained over 500 patient experts, but it's not enough. And I think thanks to the new innovation, there is a need for structuring the support and the empowerment of patients, not only from ourselves, but from the institution themselves, in terms of funding, in terms of opportunities to learn and be engaged. But that also goes beyond the possibility of getting engaged. A patient is also a patient and a carer in most cases. You need to have time, you need to take time and leave from the job that you have or the family that you care for. So you need to create also a condition to allow for patients to become experts, but then also to participate.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Alexandra, I wanted to come back to you, and then I want to bring in an Alliance member on this question, but I wanted to come back to you on this question of payment models and so on, because when we talk about the challenges of bringing therapy to market, and Anna was pointing when she showed her chart, to the ones that are coming on stream, but also the ones that have disappeared, and talked about commercial non-viability. But we also have the issue of the sustainability of our healthcare systems. And we heard Gaetano Guglielmi say this could be critical, create a really critical situation. We also have people like one of our audience, Joanna Basalti, who questions the costs of such therapies, saying high therapy prices are often not justified by R&D costs. Can the EU and national governments prevent unfair pricing and distortion of innovation incentives? So there's a whole issue here around the viability of this from an industry perspective, but also the sustainability of healthcare systems. A comment, if you would, to that, and then I'd like to bring in Dr. Giovanni Migliaccio, but Alexander first, and then I'll come to Anna after that.
Thanks, Jackie. I think it's important to look at both, to look at the reasons for failures of the products Anna has mentioned, and also to look at the sustainability of the healthcare system. So also to look into the future, how can we accommodate them? I think, as it was rightfully mentioned, I think some of those products were just not commercial successes, maybe because at that time we had a regulatory system which was ready to approve those products and to make sure that there is a positive risk-benefit ratio for those products. But maybe it was not that we didn't have the right healthcare system at the member states to accommodate them in the healthcare system. So maybe the HTA systems were not fit for purpose. Maybe payers were not educated enough about those type of one-time treatments. And there's always the one being the first mover or the one being the second mover. And I would think that systems were just not ready because we didn't have such discussions as we have them today and as we have been having them over the last couple of years. So a lot has happened. A lot of positive things have happened. So I think when we look now at ATMPs, a lot of fine-tuning of healthcare system has been taking place. It's a matter of fact that those therapies undergo HTA systems. At least I'm not aware of any healthcare system which would exempt an ATMP from a value demonstration exercise, which we call HTA. I think they have to undergo these type of systems at the national level these days. Likewise, the ATMPs will be among the first products next to cancer medicine, which probably in 3 or 4 years from now would have to undergo an EU HTA system. So there is value demonstration. And also let's bear in mind that for those products, you have to negotiate the price with the payer. So it's not a free pricing system. You have to negotiate those prices in almost all of the healthcare systems. However, we have to talk about sustainability of healthcare systems. It's critical. And I think what we have seen, and here I'd also like to mention very clearly that the ATMPs, which we have seen launched over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, starting with the CAR T-cell first generation here, have almost all offered innovative payment models. They have offered outcome-based guarantees. And I would really call for an openness for both sides to be willing to sit at the table to discuss about what are the outcome parameters the payers want to see. You can talk about duration. I mean, you can talk about, are we talking about the next 5 years of effect or the next 10 years of effect? This is a type of a negotiation. And in the negotiation, a negotiation is only successful if both sides of the table leave the room being somewhat satisfied at the end. So I think that's a need, and I think, and I would like to say very clearly, we've seen that in all of those products which have been brought to the market. Maybe not in all the insurances, because you don't always come to an agreement, but we haven't seen that in too many other products. So that's really unique and specific for these one-time treatment options. And I would call for an openness for those type of models. Might not be the only solution, but I think it's a big part of the solution.
Thank you very much. Let me now bring in Dr. Giovanni Migliaccio, Scientific Director of the Centro Valutazione Biologiche and Farmacologiche, representing the European Pediatric Transnational Research Infrastructure, EPTRI. Welcome to you. Very good to have you with us, Giovanni. Your thoughts on this question of the challenge of bringing therapies to market?
Oh, thanks, Jackie. That is a question that is not easy to answer. Thank you. Well, you have seen the data that Anna presented. There are their challenges. These are new products. They have a different way to act. No one is really sure what is their mechanism of action. No one is really sure it's for life, it's for 1 month, it's for 1 year. Everything is difficult when it's new. However, we need to have a novel approach to all the system. The concept of leveraging the academic institution capacity to use the non-profit to move the development of a new drug from a model of covering the risk and covering a profit to moving to a model where the drug development is based on a final product that is priced on cost of goods, not on cost of development, which is completely different. You know, many of the profit organizations will work for money, but they have to cover the risk. And if you accept a delayed payment, well, the bank asks for interest. So all of these kind of things are not easy to answer, but we have a centralized system for product registration. We could have a centralized system for having, let's say, a minimal price for innovative product based on fixed outcome for specific disease. That is possible, but we need the political willing to put it together. So that's it.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. Anna, you talked earlier, and I'll come to Anna and then to Pauline after that. You talked earlier about it isn't easy because they don't always fit into the current system, the reimbursement system and so on. How do you see an approach that is going to address these issues? Alexander mentioned innovative payment models. He talked about hedging the risk. How do you see the solution to this problem?
I don't have the solution, I have to get clear, but it's obviously that what Alexander just said is absolutely true. perhaps some of these past failures is because they were ready to be approved, but not ready to be used in the way. We are asking different questions. Remember, for approval, we ask, does it work? So if the benefit and risk has the right proportion, you get an authorization. What they ask is different, is how well does it work? How does it compare with what I already have? And how well does it fit in my system? And those are far more complicated questions in a way. So you just got two versions. Alexander was talking about, let's assume that we are going to have an easy way to pay a lot of money because we are putting the development cost in there. And Giovanni was saying more or less, forget about the development cost. A lot is being done by non-profit academics and organizations, and only you probably will have to find a way in the middle. I don't believe that, it's good to start from the strings and then let's be moving into the middle and say society takes the risk and the profit, not the other way around.
Thank you very much. Pauline, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I also don't have the answer, of course, but I really agree with what Anna just said. We have to find the answer in the middle. So we should look at alternative payment models. We really should look how is the product analyzed, assessed, the registration process, and how do the HTAs assess the product. So we really should look at that and find a solution for those two processes. And next to that, I think it's really important we take in mind that a lot of the development costs indeed is done at academia. So we should really have the discussion with all the parties to, I think to find that solution in the middle, because it's always in the middle, because it's not only development costs done at academia, but it's also registration costs, etc., etc. So,
Thank you very much. I want to come back in a little while on those regulatory requirements, Pauline, some of the things you said, but I wanted to come to an issue that the audience highlighted in the word cloud, and that was the question of cross-border. And I want to link this to the infrastructure challenge, because Simone and Alexander, you both talked in your presentations about this challenge, about the fact that these are very complex therapies. They need special expertise, they need specialist centers to do it. What do you see, perhaps come to Simone this time first, in terms of the challenge we need to meet in order to provide the infrastructure that we can, but then recognizing that these will always be specialist centers. So some patients, many patients potentially will have to cross borders. Alexander, I think, said earlier, we don't necessarily need to change the legislation. We do need to make it work better. Would you share that view, or do you think we need more fundamental change in order to address this?
Well, no, the fundamental changes have been done in the sense that particularly when it comes to the clinical infrastructure, we have the European reference network already in terms of clinical and health infrastructure for rare diseases, where the excellence is concentrated and is shared across countries, across centers. And this is still enlarged because in many cases the knowledge needs to arrive to the patient, and the patient doesn't need to travel, particularly when it comes to diagnosis. But in our recent research surveys, patients are willing to travel to other countries if there is a therapy available in the 80 to 90% of the cases, which is much greater than other diseases. So we don't afraid, if there is a therapy, we will get there if need be. But what I say that we need to improve is the strategic view of this overall system. At European level, we need to have an holistic view or a comprehensive strategic view on how we want to make use of these therapies. And accordingly, then, we need to increase research funding and cooperation basic to translational research. To add to the points that I said before, we need the regulatory system to be in place, which is functioning, but we also need a system to allow for the access, and this is based on the provision of the cross-border healthcare system, cross-border healthcare provision, which I agree with Alexander, they are not working well because there is a resistance, there is unawareness of the possibilities, there is no streamlined pathway for these therapies, because when probably 2008 the regulation on social services and 2011 the cross-border the directive on patient rights in cross-border healthcare did not have these therapies in mind yet. Now here we need much more willingness, we need to have more information, embed national contact points within ERNs, streamlining the processes to ensure that the therapies are
Thank you. And Alexander, this is one of those areas, going back to Anna's point about things that don't always fit into systems. One of the issues I know because of pre-authorization or so on is it can be difficult in areas where in one country, these therapies are not within their basket of care, as it were. What do you think concretely, when you say we need to make it work better, can you just go into a little bit more detail of what we need to do to ensure, or is it, I mean, can the answer be we build up the infrastructure, we have more centers of excellence, or are we always going to have, do you think, this cross-border issue because of the complexity of these therapies?
I think especially in ultra-rare diseases, we will have to work with a cross-border healthcare framework for sure, probably also in the rare disease areas. For the simple reason that not in all the countries there will be a specialized center. So I think it's really an example that the European Commission, when analyzing whether the framework works, should really take on very top, should take very top line, because it's a critical issue. Usually we're talking about life-threatening diseases. Usually we're talking about therapy options which are in urgent need and in a quick need. We've seen in the same disease that Germany has made a decision to send patients to Italy for a treatment with a gene therapy, while, sorry to mention that, while Belgium has decided not to do so. And very often we hear that it's not, the answer is very often, it's not in my home country's basket of care, exactly like you're saying, Jackie. That was, in at least this one case, that was the justification. And actually, if you look at the legislative framework, it's not a justification. They just have to give pre-approval. It's not written anywhere that it has to be in the country's basket of care. It's a decision you can make on a single patient to say, I sent that patient to Milan or wherever that specialized center is. And it's not really applied in the proper way. I think there is more education needed. I hear very often, not in just in this one case, it's not in my home country's basket of care. For me to get it into my home country's basket of care, I have to do an HTA and I have to do a price negotiation and so on and so forth. But it's not needed really. Neither by law, it's required to have it, at least in the regulation, it's not required to have it in the home country's basket of care. Nor would it be efficient to run a product where there's just 1 or 2 patients in a country through this whole HTA system. You can negotiate with a company, and the companies are very much willing to negotiate with these payers for that individual patient, but let's not be overly bureaucratic here. Let's work with the existing framework and not always have these type of arguments. It's not in my home country's basket of care.
Thank you. Before I give Anna a chance to react to that, Pauline, did you want to add something here?
No, I think not directly, but there's one point I really would like to emphasize for this, but also for the previous discussion we had. And that's really what is very important in all, and that's transparency. So we really should be transparent about costs of the product, but also about why a product is approved by HTAs or not, and also with regard to the cross-border issue for the products.
Thank you very much. Anna.
I cannot comment much about the cross borders. This is something that we see, and it will be great. And I see that Simone and Alexander have the right approach. I can comment on the need of having a single specialized, trained, good hospital to do that. It's something that patients sometimes query, and sometimes even the other hospitals, they would like to provide that treatment. This is normally the decision of the company where they are going to put, and it's not an easy thing. Those things are not transportable, the knowledge and the skills. And we have so much evidence that doing an operation, surgical operation, in a hospital that does 100 or 2, the results are completely different. This is that square.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just put a very specific question to you, because we have two questions relating to it, from Belaid Sekali, who says, due to the complexities of ATMPs and their safety efficacy profiles, how a decision can be made by the Commission to allow some of the classified ATMPs, e.g. CAR T cells, to be produced in hospitals outside the ATMP regulatory framework? Is it wise to make a distinction between cell-based products produced in a pharmaceutical facilities versus in a hospital? And another person saying marketing authorization prevents the production of ATMPs in hospitals, reducing access. Can we address this? And I don't know if it's something you can pick up on. Before we move, I want to talk about the regulatory framework and where we go from here, but can you pick up on that, or can anyone else?
Everybody will have an opinion on this because it's a hot topic, and it's actually a dangerous. I will be cautious here because hospital exemption is a decision at the level of the national competent authorities. I'm speaking for EMA, for Europe, rather than any country. So that's why I'm being cautious. But this is three different questions put together in one. And the answer is the hospital exception has a role, because if you just tie the hands that anybody can only use what is, then the innovation will be slow. They certainly have a role, and there will be some patients for which the only option to get treated is through a hospitalization. So it's not that. Now, the idea that anybody in any hospital can do an approved drug, which is what seems to be suggested in there, goes back to my previous idea. These are complicated treatments. The number of SOPs, protocols, reagents coming and going, they make a huge difference if you follow the ones that you have evidence for, or you follow the ones that are interpreted by somebody else. The training and the companies it looks very easy, but it's not.
Okay, thank you. Pauline, you talked about the hospital exemption earlier on, so I don't know whether you want to pick up on this point too. And then I'd like to move to the policy, the regulatory requirements, and where we go from here. But Pauline, a quick one on that if you would like to.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, the hospital exemption is, I think, very important, and we should use it. We should maybe redefine it, but use it in its way. We guarantee safety efficacy to patients. But again, like Anna said, it's not under the remit of the EMA. So we want to harmonize it, but we really should think how we harmonize it, because it's regulated in every country in a different manner. Yeah. So it's something to discuss. Yeah.
So I think when I wanted to ask you all, in terms of improving the conditions to better realize the potential of these therapies, and we've touched on a number of issues in terms of how we need to adapt the framework and so on. But really at this moment, how do you see the role of the pharmaceutical strategy? We have the pharmaceutical strategy, we have the health union, we have the European health data space. Many of you have mentioned the HTA regulation. We are at a moment of immense change and immense, as you've all said, opportunity here. How do you see all of this being developed under the umbrella of the strategy? Anna, from your perspective as someone who will implement what emerges from all of this, how do you see where we are in the process now? Brief ones from all of you, and then I'd like to ask you a final quick question.
Okay, if you want only one word, it's opportunity, because this is our chance. And we know so much more now than 12 years ago when we first started with the regulation that it will be difficult. Now, if you ask me what will be my top of the list, I would really like that clinical trials for advanced therapies became very attractive in Europe, because we are so good at the before and so good at the end, that is the bit in the middle. So if we only get 1 point, my point will be for better, more attractive, more reliable clinical trials. Make it attractive for industry to do the clinical trials in Europe.
Thank you very much. Simone, for you, this is our chance. This is the moment of truth. If it is, in terms of where would you put the focus broadly now in terms of key next steps, and what for you is your absolute priority? We heard Anna's there. What for you is most important if we are to get this right?
If we combine my priorities and Anna's priorities, I'll be a happy man, really, because that starts with the clinical trials, and embedding them in the European reference network also requires investment. What the difference between the Europe and the US or other regions has is the quality of investment in this therapy to match unmet needs with research, and that's what we need, investment in this sense. But my first priority is that on all of these ATMP issues, we now have a structure that goes from regulatory in development, but already based on the UNHCA core, we already have a joint assessment. What we need is joint assessment and negotiation between countries to solve the issues that Alexander was talking about, getting the member states to discuss the value of this treatment, how many people they should have in the different countries, and agree on a value and a price tag on these therapies. I think this is the one thing that the pharmaceutical strategy can do for patients with rare disease.
Thank you very much indeed. Pauline, for you, as we look to the future, you highlighted a number of areas and you were very much emphasizing this issue of harmonization. And you were talking about classification, the criteria and so on, and you referred to it also in the context of the hospital exemption just now. How are we going to do this? Again, this is one of those areas where we've heard it time and again today, fragmented European market. That's what makes it so difficult to address these issues. What for you is the key to unlocking a common approach that will really enable us to realize the potential of these therapies in the most effective way? And how do you see this playing out in the context of the pharma strategy?
Yeah, but I think I can be very short. I have two words which I think are very important, and those are collaboration and transparency. So when we look at the last few years, we have seen quite a few papers have been published in how we can improve patient access to ATMPs. So, for example, we have the Lero paper in which I was an author, but we also have this paper of the Transform Alliance. And I think in most of the papers, very important recommendations are given. So also the ones I discussed, it's about harmonization, about the hospital exemption, etc., etc. And I think it's very important to realize that we only can bring these recommendations into practice. So we really can take the next step if we start with collaboration and transparency between all stakeholders in this. And I think the Transform Alliance can bring us that platform to make this happen.
Bear with me, sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Alexander, you have the last word. Many recommendations that we heard about earlier, a lot of work to do in a lot of different areas, and we've touched in one way or another on almost all of them this afternoon. But for you, at this moment of opportunity, Anna said, this is our chance. If we are to seize that chance, for you from an industry perspective, what do we need to do? What's the key priority or the key next step?
Yeah, I think we have to address affordability indeed. And I think starting with the positive thing, which is we have a very robust regulatory system. We have a lot of knowledge now about those therapies, which we didn't have 10 years ago. We have a very good way of collaborating when it comes to real-world evidence. The Darwin project in EMA is a very important project. We need to integrate, and this is what I wanted to say before about real-world evidence. I think we need to integrate the demands of the payers and the demands of the regulators. Both needs have to be met. And I think that's very critical. So if I may add one other thing to the list, I think in order to address affordability, I think we need to have an open-mindedness to really be open for those type of outcome guarantees, for generating real-world evidence, for innovative payment models, to really maybe also at the EU level have a discussion about how do those agreements look like in the various countries. What is feasible, what is not feasible, what is in the interest of payers, patients, physicians, and also the company. So I think I really would call for an openness for new vehicles, new tools at the reimbursement level to be used in order to accommodate those treatment options. Because I think without those options, without those vehicles, without innovative payment models, it will be very difficult to accommodate those treatments in the long run.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for a great discussion. The whole idea behind Transform, behind the Alliance, behind the MEP interest group is to have a platform for dialogue, to foster that dialogue and provide that evidence-based policy recommendations. We've heard about the policy recommendations, we've had the dialogue. This is the beginning of those discussions, but thank you so much to all of you. I wish we had twice as long for our discussion, but I'm very grateful to you all. It is now my pleasure, before we end today's session, to give the floor to Andrzej Knotek, MEP, who is co-chair of the Transform MEP interest group, to give us some reflections on, he's been listening throughout, on what he's heard and the way ahead. Andrzej, Thank you so much. Thank you for co-hosting today's event. Over to you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for the floor. Just a quick check. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you. I can see you beautifully. Thank you.
Excellent. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends of Cell and Gene community. Today we have had a really exciting, positive, and fruitful debate. And I would like to congratulate to all speakers and to all experts for their professional remarks and contributions. There is a clear signal which confirms that there is enormous potential of cell and gene and transformative therapies. And with this debate, we send a clear signal to all politicians in the EU, on the EU level, but also on the member states level, to cooperate together and to address and implement measures to find better perspective for the patients, because they are the first. And I'm convinced that the MEP interest group can contribute to enhancing of the dialogue and getting this medicine to our patients. The debate which we hold today, let's say, outlined a number of bottleneck and challenges which needs to be done to, let's say, have the better perspective for our patients. I have tried to listen carefully to all of these experts, and I have noted down few, let's say, takeaway notes which should cover the debate. So the main takeaways and the main consensus has been to adapt the existing legal framework to also cover and include and work with cell and gene therapies. Also harmonization of best practice. This was also often spelled, and let's say common approach among the EU states and among all stakeholders. Various aspects of cross-border cooperation and access to the treatment has been discussed. Also stimulation of research and development of infrastructure through funding or other financial instruments was spelled. Innovative payments and models to ensure sustainability of our healthcare systems and also access to the medicine. This was one of the topics. Also addressing the data gap through real-world data evidence approach. And the last, definitely not least, was the awareness. Now it depends from which point we look. Maybe awareness from the point of politicians, that means also the taxpayers about the great potential, but also about the awareness from patients about having real expectations. This was a very, very interesting remark that not at every stage we can cure the gene issues. From my side, I would like to thank for this professional debate because politicians and decision makers, in my eyes, they need to build on expertise, on the review of legislation, of review and recommendations of experts, and address them in the upcoming legislation. This is the only way moving forward and making sustainable life in Europe through sustainable regulation. What I would like to also accent is, and I'm very happy and proud of Transform for this approach, that all stakeholders can be on board. This is the only way also how to move forward, including patients as a first, but also manufacturers, scientists, hospitals, doctors, and so on. We all need to work together. The Transform Alliance, the Transform platform, is an open one, so everyone is welcome to join us. It's never late to join. I believe that the number of MEPs interested will be growing, and it has been growing, so we are on a positive trend, and I believe in next months there will be higher figure. And I have here also a warm invitation, or let's say maybe an early warning of a next debate, which will come in the autumn. To my knowledge, we don't have a concrete date today, so it is only positive early warning, and we will debate more details how to ensure equal access for patients across the EU. So my final sentence, dear colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you for your contributions, to all experts, to all panelists, also to the secretariat of the platform, to you, Jackie, and let me wish you nice summer holidays in the EU or somewhere else. Thank you very much
Indeed, Andre. And in return, can I thank you and Alessandro Moretti and the other MEPs for their support, for your hosting of today's event. We are very, very grateful to you. Let me just add my thanks again to all our speakers today, to the Alliance for organizing this event, and to all of you for joining us for this very important discussion. As Andre said, there will be a second event in the autumn, and there'll be details to follow on that. There will in a moment be an opportunity for networking, so don't go away. If you click on the networking tab on the left hand side of your screen, it will tell you how you can network with other people who've attended this event. And don't forget, those recommendations are now on the website. If you want to look at them in more detail, read the detail of them, you will find them there. Please do take a look. Thank you all very much, and it only remains for me to add my best wishes for what I hope will be a pleasant and trouble-free summer. Thank you very much to you all, and goodbye.
Thanks, Jackie.